Today is a big day on Capitol Hill with Republicans in both chambers holding elections to decide who will serve in leadership roles in the 119th Congress. Now, most watched was the selection of the next Senate GOP leader, something Republicans haven't done in 18 years. I mean, this only happened once since I've been here. Now, since that was Mitch McConnell, he won the job back in 2007. And in the end, Senator John Thun of South Dakota was tapped to succeed Leader McConnell, who is retiring as the longest-serving party leader in the history of the United States Senate. So what might we expect to see in the Senate come January? Joining me now to discuss this and much more, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, who serves on 4 Senate committees and, as I mentioned, was elected today as the conference vice chair. Senator Lankford, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Thanks, Tony. Good to see you again.
Congratulations on your election to the leadership team there in the Senate.
Thank you. There's a lot of work to be done, and I think the American people were pretty clear last week during the election to say, hey, we want things to be different. So it's time to be able to work to make sure things are different.
Let me ask you a question about that, because my view of what took place today in the selection of the leader of John Thun, who was number 2 under Mitch McConnell, it sent a message to, there was a grassroots effort driven by a lot of Trump supporters to upend the process and elevate Rick Scott as the top post. Was this the Republican senator saying that we're going to do it our way?
No, I'd tell you what it really was. None of the 3 of them are opposed to Trump. And it was very interesting, the social media push that got there that just exploded, saying Trump wants this person, wants Rick Scott, not John Thun or John Cornyn, was interesting because President Trump actually never spoke on this. I've noticed that President Trump is not a shrinking violet that doesn't express his opinion when he doesn't have one. When he has an opinion, he says it. He never spoke. Tucker Carlson did. Elon Musk did. But President Trump never did. And it seemed pretty clear that he was staying out of this race on it. And I think a lot of people in the Senate took that as a hint on it to be able to look at it and say, who's out there? When you look at even 4 years ago, there's a scorecard that's done is how often members vote along with the president. John Thun voted with the president 91% of the time. It was actually one of the highest numbers in the Senate for voting the President Trump's position. So all of this spin out there to saying Thun is secretly or openly opposed to President Trump is not true. In fact, based on how he voted, it definitely wasn't true. And President Trump never expressed an opinion of the 3 of them on which one he would prefer.
How lively was the discussion there behind closed doors as you made these decisions today?
Yeah, we had about a 2.5-hour conference last night. There was a lot of back and forth with all 3 of the candidates to be able to discuss everything. And then today, about another 2.5 hours again of just presentation, conversation, where we're going to go on it. But I have to tell you, it was very amicable in many ways. It was differences of opinion. How would you deal with things? But John Thun gave very solid answers on a lot of things like, what are we going to do on reconciliation? We're going to try to expand it as much as we can. What are we going to do to be able to push through President Trump's nominees? How quickly can we get those done? Are we going to protect the filibuster? The answer was yes. I mean, there were a lot of things that members were asking that he gave very solid answers to.
Did it get into the ideological differences between the 3 candidates, or was it mostly just process?
Mostly process, quite frankly, because ideologically, quite frankly, the 3 candidates are very similar. In some ways, it's like 3 candidates are all conservatives running in a primary, where you realize, okay, there's very little difference between ideology in these 3 individuals. It's how they actually do it, how they communicate, it's process of what they actually do. Quite frankly, I didn't see a difference between the 3 of them, and I'm friends with all 3 of them. That's part of the challenge here. We've got 53 members, and just about everybody knows all 3 of them, except for the brand new members coming in, which is always the challenge for the new members. But this is the time the election is always done. Literally, this election date was set 2 years ago. It was the same date as was done 2 years before that and 2 years before that. New member orientation happens this week. During that new member orientation, when the new members are already here, we have leadership elections for the next 2 years after that, so everybody can participate. So this was the date that's long been set, but members had to kind of choose which one do we think process-wise is going to actually be most effective for the next 2 years.
All right, Senator Lankford, let's move from process, personalities to policy, because I've heard one of the first policy initiatives that the Senate is liable to take up in the new Congress is going to be a border bill. What might that look like?
I actually am doubtful that a border bill is the first one that comes up. I think what happens is President Trump starts enforcing the border in a very solid, quality, legal way. We see the numbers drop dramatically, and so the importance of moving a border bill will not be the same as it was a year ago when there was mass chaos at the border. Now, there are still loopholes in the law, especially the asylum law, that do need to be fixed in law that can't be done with executive action. But I think the importance of passing that first will drop pretty dramatically. We've got 12 appropriation bills that got to be done. We have a farm bill that needs to be done. We have tax policy that expires at the end of this next year. We've got energy issues that need to be done and permitting. So there's a lot of other things I think will come first, and a lot of things that are very important, though. The nation knows I'm very passionate about keeping the border closed and being able to keep it secure. So I think that will come, but I doubt it's first.
All right. Well, let's talk about another issue that you have personally jumped into. You serve on the Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. Yesterday, you and the chairman of that committee, a Democrat, Gary Peters of Michigan, sent a letter to the director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons after learning about its handling of faith-based organizations who applied to provide recidivism services to federal prisons. Now, I opened the door back in Louisiana to faith-based organizations. We found that the recidivism rates dropped for those engaged in faith-based policies. Your letter points to the fact that these faith-based groups have been given the cold shoulder.
They have, and that's been very, very frustrating. I was actually a part of the First Step Act, and it was an amendment that I actually brought to that bill to be able to make sure that we were opening up federal prisons to faith-based anti-recidivism programs that are out there. We don't want someone who's actually gone through the process, they've served their time for 10 years to be able to ever end up back in prison. The best way to be able to do that is to be able to have some programs and training, job skills, other things. But faith-based programs have been very successful in state prisons, but they've been prohibited in federal prisons. So in the First Step Act years ago under President Trump, I actually got that amendment into the bill to be able to make sure the federal prisons would stop blocking faith-based initiatives, but they have never actually done that. They continue to be able to block these faith-based initiatives. Faith-based initiatives can apply, and the federal entity, the Bureau of Prisons, will just say, hey, you don't have enough evidence this works in federal prison. Well, the reason they don't have enough evidence is they're never allowed in to be able to actually do it. So they're given this kind of convenient out to be able to get out. So I was able to convince the Democrat current chairman of Homeland Security to join me in a letter, brought him all the evidence. It's something we worked on for months, literally, to be able to push him to say, this has got to be able to shift. So I do think it's very important, and quite frankly, for all of us that come from a faith perspective, we have seen what happens when a soul is redeemed by Christ and been forgiven and has a new purpose in their life. Why would we want to prevent people in prison from having the opportunity to be able to have total life change and turnaround before they're released after they've done their time?
Right. I mean, and the evidence is very clear that this does help. It reduces recidivism, which reduces the cost to society and to taxpayers. I have a feeling, Senator James Lankford, that in about 2 months, things might change a little bit at the Bureau of Prisons. What do you think?
Well, I want to make sure it is very, very clear that it needs to change and that the bureaucracy at the Bureau of Prisons doesn't hold it down.
All right, we'll just pray that they don't hold it captive. Senator James Lankford, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today. And again, congratulations on your elevation to a leadership post there in the Senate.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Keep praying for the nation. We have a lot to do still.